Going to call the study session to order. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
The record will reflect that Council Members Webb and Daigle are absent, and they have excused absences.
Thank you. First item is clarification for items on the consent calendar. Councilmember Gardner.
Yes, on number 4, the new parking.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Gardner, and this goes to each council member tonight. We had some concerns last time that people were not speaking close enough to the mic and indeed make sure it's on. So I'm going to try to not interrupt anybody, but if you could remember to speak about 3 or 4 inches away from the mic. It wasn't picking up well on TV last time.
Okay, is this better?
I can hear you, yes.
All right. On item number 4, did we give any consideration in our changing of the parking rates to premium for the weekend in our lots?
We do have a proposal to have premiums on holidays. We didn't propose a premium on weekends, though.
Well, I know we didn't propose it, but was it considered?
You want to speak to that, Tracy, possibly?
Good afternoon, Tracy McCraner, Finance Director. We did talk about that because some of our neighbors do that, but we thought we could, in trying to keep with the simplest approach and straightforward approach where it's not confusing and it's not overly complicated, we felt that we could still be competitive with our neighbors and still get a good revenue source coming in without going in that direction, but we are open to discussion if you would like to think of that. Huntington Beach does that for the weekends around holidays. It also picks several high use weekends during the summer months, but their rate structure, being a tiered structure, is pretty complex, and not that we're not willing to do that. We just thought, since we were coming to you with a pretty decent size rate increase, we did not propose that. Okay.
Councilmember Selledge.
I have none.
Councilmember Zansky.
None, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Hand.
Yes, 2 quick ones. On item number 5, which is the rate increase for CR&R, I just want to verify that the increase that is being proposed here is a straight pass-through of the cost increase being incurred for the work.
That's absolutely correct. The increase is directly related to the landfill increase. We took the tonnage from the last year, did that calculation, and there's no profit in here. It's straight pass-through.
Okay. All right. And then on number 8, I would just make a comment. This is the completion of the work on Balboa Boulevard. I certainly agree with staff's comments about the quality of that work, and I'm hoping that we'll be very mindful of that if we ever run into Ortiz again. It's almost a buckboard out there. That's all I have.
I have got a draft blowing on me. I'm going to be catching a cold if we don't do something about this air conditioning. Thank you.
And I have a question on supplemental item number 20 here. We've got some correspondence on that. Is there any brush on that? Can that be continued?
Assistant City Manager Wood is saying that, yes, it could be continued.
Okay, and then on clarifications, I know there are some items on the Civic Center that are on the regular agenda, but there may be some information to present on that tonight. Is that during the study session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, without objections by the council and without direct concern from the city attorney, we did want to spend a little bit of time in your study session today going over and framing the Civic Center issue that's on your calendar later tonight. We can indeed also present it later tonight or present an abbreviated version of it tonight, but we thought it would be a good chance for you to spend some time on this in a little bit longer format. So unless you have concerns, we were going to do that after the East Balboa, the parking lot discussion.
That's fine. Seeing no further items then, any clarification from the public on any items on the consent calendar? Seeing none, then let's go to item number 2, separation of restaurant use permits and operator land use permits.
Mr. Mayor and council members, Jaime Murillo from the Planning Department will make this presentation.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Jaime Murillo of the Planning Department. Staff was asked to take a look at use permits as they relate to eating and drinking establishments and to see whether or not there was ability to operate the operator specifically. That request came out of some, I guess, ongoing problems we have with bars and nightclubs in the city. And there's on the PowerPoint, a number of problems that are commonly identified at public hearings or as neighborhood complaints. You know, those are the overcrowding of these establishments in the evenings, assaults that occur when people have been drinking throughout the night and they leave the facilities, you know, at 2 a.m. There's a number of people who tend to loiter in the neighborhoods. There's public drunkenness. Public urination has occurred in the city streets. And there's a lot of noise complaints, especially after 11 p.m. And staff kind of met with members of PD, fire department, and code enforcement, and city attorney's office kind of look at what really causes the problem. And there's no doubt that it's excess alcohol consumption that occurs at these facilities or these establishments. But it's also the permissive environment of the establishment. What that means is kind of the music's a lot louder. There's less emphasis on dining, and it's more on serving drinks. And it's more of a gathering place for socialization. And so that also includes restaurants that become bars and nightclubs in the evenings. And so we took a look at what specifically required or causes a restaurant to become a bar or nightclub. And a lot has to do with hours. Anything that operates past 11 is really focusing more on drinking rather than food service. The crowds tend to be larger. There's limited food service. And one thing we did notice was the amplified music. And that's important because although it's not live, amplified music does become an entertainment or an attraction to a facility. They do crank up the music, and it does help transform that restaurant into more of a nightclub environment. We do have a number of land use tools in place that we do use when we're looking at new establishments. We have the Alcoholic Beverage Outlet Ordinance, which basically applies to any restaurants, bars, or nightclubs that serve alcohol. Use permit is required for any new use or any substantially changed use. And something we haven't really done in the past is we can apply it to existing uses that are non-conforming if they have no use permits but are deemed to be a public nuisance. We can call them in and require them to get a use permit. And the benefit of that is it allows us to apply a number of conditions on that use permit that would help us regulate the design and operation of that establishment. The more recent use permits we have worked on, according to PD, have been pretty effective in regulating these establishments. The conditions have been a lot tighter, and we understand now the type of restaurants we're dealing with. If they're asking for late hours, we're able to properly condition those establishments so we can regulate that use.
So the reason that we regulate alcoholic beverages through a use permit is that we're preempted by the state from using any other technique. Is that correct?
That's correct. We can't actually regulate the service of alcohol, but if it's the land use permit, we are able to regulate the establishment that way. But one thing with use permits, it does confer vested land use right to that property. It can be revoked upon making certain findings, but it's pretty difficult. It's a lengthy process. It's burdensome, and it can be costly for the city. Ideally, an operating permit that could be issued to the individual operator would be preferable, in that it could be reviewed or terminated on a periodic basis. And this is important when we approve one use permit for a restaurant and they happen to sell the business to a new operator. Sometimes the change of ownership, we end up having a lot of problems with these restaurants, and that the operator's not really abiding by the conditions of approval and is trying to transform the restaurant to something that it was never really intended for. So operating permits is one way to address that issue. We do have one existing type of operating permit available to us today, and that's the live entertainment permit. And those are required by use permits and by our municipal code for any live entertainment that's provided in a restaurant or a nightclub. And that includes the use of DJs. It's a permit issued to the individual, It's not a land use entitlement, so if problems do occur, we can revoke that live entertainment permit without impacting the use permit and those rights granted under that use permit. But it currently doesn't apply to amplified music. So one idea staff had was to change the live entertainment permit to an entertainment permit, which could include one of the criteria for requiring the permit is establishments that play amplified music after 11 p.m. Another change we would recommend is that the entertainment permit be subject to the review and approval of the police department. Currently, the live entertainment permit is reviewed by the revenue department, and sometimes some establishments that have been known to be problematic are still granted the live entertainment permit because PD's kind of been kept out of the loop. So this is one way to kind of bring in some experience on these establishments. And then we would require these entertainment permits to be required as a condition of approval of any new or amended use permit.
Is there a particular magical number at 11 o'clock or?
11 p.m. that's actually consistent with what our new code's going to require. There's some special review criteria for restaurants that are open past 11 p.m. and so for consistency, we decided to use 11 p.m. Some of the benefits of that, again, would be provides us an effective enforcement tool, and it'll provide us some leverage when we are dealing with some of the problem operators. They're going to recognize that if they lose their ability to provide the amplified music, that could result in a loss of one component of their establishment that makes it more of a popular place where people want to gather and hang out. So hopefully, if problems do arise, we can discuss terminating their entertainment permit and hopefully resolve some of the issues we have. And a couple considerations for council. If we did pursue this revision, it would only apply to new restaurants or new establishments. Existing establishments would not be required to come in and get an entertainment permit unless they're amending their use permit or if we deem them to become a public nuisance and we do call them up for review. There's a couple more aggressive options of, dealing with the problem. We could create a new operating permit that not only regulates the amplification of music, but it would be required for any establishment that serves alcohol. We did look at a number of other jurisdictions that do require a police permit for establishments that serve alcohol, so that's one option. And then the most aggressive option would be pursuing full revocation of use permits for problem establishments which continue to violate their use permit conditions.
What else will we regulate besides the entertainment?
Well, it could be the late hours, food service, and then the service of alcohol.
I thought we couldn't regulate the service of alcohol.
You can if it's tied to our zoning code, and Leonie might better help me out better on that question.
Yes. The state regulates the sale of alcohol, but from a land use perspective, we have local control over the time, place, and manner of that use to the extent it affects neighborhood compatibility issues and those sorts of things. So I think we do that now, generally, as we do sometimes regulate the hours, and we could do that with alcohol.
So it's not the hours of the business, but not the actual sale of
Correct. Correct.
There. So we're not preempted by the ABC on that. Like we tell every bar in town they got to close at 10 o'clock, and ABC can't do anything about that.
The ABC authorizes a particular individual or business to engage in the sale of alcohol, subject to certain parameters, shall we speak. Those are always going to defer to the city's zoning and regulations and whatnot. What we need to be cognizant of is it's not a particular business by business type, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. The city would have to, in effect, adopt as a land use matter a zoning regulation on the sale of alcohol based on certain hours. That would involve things like looking at neighborhood compatibility issues, those sorts of things. But it is possible to regulate the hours. You do need to be careful of what you have existing and applying it on a uniform basis.
So one alternative might be to require then for any amendment to a use permit that it would be required, for example, to have an entertainment permit.
Yes, that is one option, but be mindful that you have an existing, what we call the ABO, Alcoholic Beverage Operation Permit, that applies to existing and new, and also old businesses that never came in for an ABO permit. If there's a nuisance type situation, public crowding, maybe we have intoxication issues, we come in and require them to get an ABO license. What's being suggested is you sort of expand on that regulation of alcohol and address also the live entertainment aspect. Similar.
Well, I'm the one that brought this up, I think. Thank you, Nancy, for reminding me. And I guess my idea on this was to do the first option above, create a new operating permit to prevent us from having to go through number 2, which is going through these full revocation hearings for use permits. It would obviously be a transitional type of a process that happens over time, and as we get new establishments in, because existing establishments would still have use permit protection. My thought was to establish a base set of restaurant regulations that would be under the use permit. For example, hours of operation. Maybe we establish that a standard restaurant under a use permit can stay open till 9 or 10 o'clock, whatever the hour is. Anything beyond that becomes an operator permit, so that the revocation procedure gets separated from and the enforcement procedure gets separated from the land use procedure, and just go through the list of all the operating characteristics that we have and see what we can create as a base set of regulations that run with the land, that are the least offensive and problematic to the community, and then the other ones that we handle through conditions on the use permit. Now we do through a operator's permit that can more easily be regulated, enforced, and revoked if we have to. And it gets us out of the really difficult situation we have in revoking land use permits. And, a lot of times we're faced with a situation with people that come before us with applications for restaurants that are, good people that want to operate a good restaurant, but they may sell it to someone else, and once that starts happening, we lose control of it. So this would be a way that we would be able to, give people that appear to be good operators a chance, and if someone else comes along or they don't live up to what they promise us, we have a better way to deal with enforcement and revocation if that becomes necessary.
I think this came up. Can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Anyway, she has her own loud voice. This came up in the bid originally, I think, is where you brought it up. And what we liked about it was the fact that we could be, in some ways, more generous than we've been, because we would have this option, right? We have become very, very conservative over the last years in granting a lot of permits, because we've been burned so many times when the good operator, as you say, sells to the not-so-good operator, and we have to go through hoops to get that under control. So this was a way of providing that flexibility, and as I recall, it was well accepted by the members.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Certainly, I agree with your point of view on this, Ed. The concern that I have is, of course, if it only applies to new permits, it's going to be a long, long time before it has any real, perhaps, has any real impact on our communities, which is why I was asking if what you described could be required to be implemented when an existing operator comes in for an amendment to his use permit. Could that then trigger the applicability of what Ed was describing?
To answer your question, yes, anytime there's an amendment to a use permit, we can apply any conditions of approval that we deem are necessary. But if this operator's permit is in effect at that time when our establishment is seeking an amendment to a use permit, we could apply that as a condition of approval. But even if we do have a problem establishment using our existing ABO ordinance, we can call them up for review today to review their operation and require them to obtain a use permit, and we could condition that operation.
Although it seems like it's so difficult to make any real progress in that kind of a scenario.
Well, if you mean difficult in the sense of going through revocation proceedings, is that what you're speaking to? And it just goes exactly to the point of two tracks. When you have a land use permit and it's a vested right, you have to go through certain steps, notice an opportunity for a revocation. And you have to make specific findings under our code. And it's generally those specific findings that the city has trouble with or difficulty with. That tends to take the long time. They're contested, they're appealed and whatnot. With an operator's permit, you would still need to provide somebody notice and opportunity, but it wouldn't be a matter of specific findings. This is something that, for instance, if it were to be imposed on prospective businesses or the old businesses, as we call them in because there's a problem. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. I thought that was my phone. That's something that we could require on a periodic basis, maybe an annual basis. The point would probably be going more away from kind of a revenue generation, which we do with some of our permits right now, and have not only planning but PD review it on a periodic basis to perhaps revoke it, terminate it, not renew it, those sorts of things. It is easier, but there is still notice, opportunity, things that the city would have to do to get the program in place.
But just to draw an example, if we had an existing operator that had a use permit that said he could be open until 2 a.m. serving alcohol, and came in for an amendment to that permit, then could we apply an operating permit that let's say to start with allows them to do all of those things, continue to do all of those things, and then in a later date we have problems and we go to revoke the operating permit? Isn't that a revocation of a land use because he already had it to start with? How does that really benefit us?
The key is by the business or the applicant voluntarily coming in and seeking an amended use permit. Maybe they want to expand square footage, but they are going and they're requesting an amendment to their application. And certainly as a condition of reviewing that amendment, we generally do impose current regulations and rules, and we will say, you know, when you came through here on your original application, we didn't have an operator's permit, but we do have one now, and that will be a condition of approval. That is how we bring the old stuff into compliance.
So because it's a matter of mutual agreement, then we're able to do that?
Correct. It's them coming in and asking for an amended use permit. If they don't come in, but we do have problems, and I want to use the term, nuisance, but it's a little bit more than that. There are specific things. If it's an ABO, where we could document, perhaps we have the police department document known problems, known complaints. We could impose that condition as a result of that bad behavior, so to speak.
Let me open this up and invite the public for any comments. Please come to the podium.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is George Schroeder, and I'm a resident of Newport Beach for 21 years now. It looks like this could be a step in the right direction. I think most of us moved to Newport Beach because we want to enjoy the many fine things and fun things that Newport Beach has to offer. Among them are our restaurants and even our bars. But we do have a problem with some bar owners and operators, and we do have a problem with overconcentration, especially in the peninsula area. But anyways, to address these ABOs, I read an article about 2 months back, and in Huntington Beach downtown on Main Street, where they have all their new bars and things, they were having a lot of problems down there. And I've read in the article that they were going to make the bars close at 12 o'clock at night, which kind of surprised me because I assumed that the right to operate went with the land, with the use permit, but I presume they may have ABOs there, where they can bring them down to a reasonable hour for the residents in the area. Anyways, I'd like to see the council go in that direction, perhaps get these ABOs in place. I don't know why bars have to be open until 2 a.m. because unless it's in an area that doesn't abut residential areas, and quite a few other bars do. But anyways, I think I support the direction you're going, and we would like to see our establishments stay here, remain open, and be successful, but work in cooperation with the residents around them. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Any other public comment?
Well, Mayor, council members, my name is Joe Reese. I'm a resident of Newport Beach. I think this is a great step in the right direction. I'm really glad to see that everyone's taking the initiative to do this. And the only thing I ask is that we go for the operating permit and not the entertainment permit. I think it's not just the entertainment that's the issue, it's the overall problem location, that the operation of that establishment itself, and not just one little part of the operation, but the entire operation. And it will have an impact on new businesses as well as the ones that come in for a change in their CUP, and I think that's a positive step in the right direction, too. So I support this. I think this is a great thing, and I'm glad to see you guys are moving in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? All right, then I'm going to close public comment on this item. I think I certainly associate myself in position with those indicated before by Mr. Selich and Mr. Hinn and Councilmember Gardner. The staff think they have enough direction on this matter?
Let me ask Jaime and David that same question. Guys, you think you have enough direction as to what to bring back? Yeah, is it?
I just want to be certain you want us to pursue the more aggressive option, the operating permit. Got it.
And it's not just restaurants, it's ABOs and other venues of live entertainment, correct?
Any premises subject to an ABC license, yes.
Okay.
Next item, proposed activated parking lot at 608 East Balboa Boulevard.
I believe Sharon is presenting this item.
Yes, I am. Thank you. We're all struggling with these microphones. And Dave Webb is going to be helping me with a few exhibits here, but we can get started. As the council knows, the city acquired the Balboa Market property earlier this year with the intention of constructing a surface parking lot on it. And we are here this afternoon asking for more specific direction on the development of that parking lot. And what is on the screen now and will be enlarged shortly is an aerial of the existing site. So it gives you an idea of what the existing parking lot looks like and also how the two pieces of property relate to one another. It's not exactly a rectangle.
Under from beginning, Dave.
All the way to the left, Dave. Better him than me. And there is a possibility that at some point in the future the city would consider building a parking structure on these two pieces of property. So staff is presenting to you two options for the construction of the surface parking lot. And there we go. There's the site plan, which doesn't change much between the two options, and we would have 33 new spaces in it. Option one would be essentially a mirror image of the existing parking lot, so we would have similar landscaping, similar stamped concrete paving, some lighting, and we would convert the existing parking lot to pay stations and install new pay stations in the new parking lot. And the cost estimate for that including contingencies, would be $265,000. And then there is a second option, which is very basic. We would eliminate the landscaping. We would just rely on existing lighting in the area rather than installing new lighting, and still do the pay stations. And the cost estimate for that, including contingencies, is $132,000. In addition to the parking lot improvements, staff met with a subcommittee of the Balboa Village bid, and they preferred option one. The thing that they were most interested in was taking this as an opportunity to install a village identification sign. And Dave, if you could go back to the aerial photo. You can see on the left of the screen the concentric circle paving. That's an area where, when we did the Balboa Village improvements years ago, there was always the thought that there would be some kind of a community identification feature placed there, and for budgetary reasons that was never implemented. And what the bid is suggesting at this point is to build a curved wall at the back of that concentric circle area and install something very similar to the city's standard entry and village identification sign, and then with some blank space on one side of it to allow for temporary advertising of community events. Our cost estimate for that is $29,000, including some uplighting, and the bid is asking that the city would install that at the city's cost initially, and the bid is offering to repay the city over the course of 10 years. In terms of funding availability, we've essentially used up everything we have in committed parking funds in the purchase of the property, so the improvement, at least the initial payment of those costs, would need to come from the general fund. However, in looking at increasing parking rates and adding parking meters and making some adjustment in how some funds are allocated to tidelands versus general fund, most of which were suggested in the Walker parking management study, we see that there's the potential for revenue to come in that would reimburse the general fund for the cost of doing this surface parking lot. So what we're asking the council for today is a direction to go forward with developing the parking lot, and which option or something in between the two if you want to do some picking and choosing, and also your direction with regard to the village identification sign.
Yeah, I'd have to say I really strongly support the recommendation here to go forward with the more improved parking lot. This, by the way, is not a full mirror image of the other lot, because we abandoned the idea of the lithocrete decorative paving that has been done elsewhere in the village, which is extremely expensive and everyone agrees is not necessary. But the difficulty that we have here is that it may be a long time. We hope not, but it might be a long time before there would be a need to build a garage on this property, and we therefore will be sitting with this parking lot for perhaps 5 years, who knows, maybe longer. And I really think at a minimum we need to have something that is reasonably attractive and done to a level of finish that wouldn't, to the naked eye, look like there was one parking lot and then, oh, by the way, we added this other one, this stepchild parking lot. And beyond that, I really, we're going to need to access parking revenues to fulfill the rest of the purchase of the Balboa market. I'm pretty sure there's going to be additional parking revenue here sufficient where we could repay the general fund for the additional cost of this lot, and we need to do the lot now. So if it would be helpful to actually formalize that as a loan from the general fund to the parking fund, I don't know if that concept makes sense, but it might, and so that we're sure that the general fund is going to get reimbursed for this cost coming out of parking revenues that are generated in the area, I think the identification sign really is something that's been considered all along. Other areas of the city have village identification signs, and so I'm hopeful for a small additional cost we can take care of that too. So for a variety of reasons, I think this is an idea that makes sense. It certainly is consistent with our desire to revitalize the Balboa Village, to help support that revitalization.
Councilor Berger?
Have we done any projections as to how long it might take in terms of parking funds to repay the general fund? And have we considered asking the bid to perhaps step up their repayment costs? I don't know how much they spend out of their budget, but whether they could maybe double and spend $2,000 a year.
They could probably do that. It's not a very well-funded budget to start with. What's the total annual funding of that bid is in the range of $15,000, something like that, 15, maybe 20.
I don't remember, but it is one of the bids that has the lowest budget, so I think it would be difficult for them to double their contribution.
I guess to the extent, though, that the bid funding does increase in the future and they get extra flexibility, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that, to require a step up in the payback. Because we have talked about that, and as a part of the parking governance of Balboa Village, we've at least bantered about in a very informal way, perhaps increasing the bid funding. So I wouldn't be opposed to that idea.
I need to say if we have any kind of projections, but I would support the first one. I mean, we do want to save dollars, but put in a plain parking lot with nothing there. That's not what the vision is for the village, and I think that landscaping adds so much to any project for environmental reasons as well as aesthetic reasons. So although it is a nice chunk more, I would support the first proposal.
I originally was really leaning towards sticking with our original plan on the $100,000, maybe adding the $32,000 to it. But the more I thought about it, whenever we do something like that, it seems like it stays that way forever. And we've made the commitment for the $3.5 million. I think your observations on the vision plan are correct. So, yeah, I'm in favor of going ahead and doing it the right way. I presume the sign, Sharon, would be the same quality of the other signs we have?
Yes.
Similar design in town?
Yes. There'd just be a little different installation because of it being on a curve, but we'd still have the raised sails and the same lettering.
Could you explain the community information thing you talked about? I didn't quite understand that.
Well, if you look at, I'm not sure we have this on the screen there. So to the left is pretty much the standard village identification sign, and then the blank space to the right would be available for the bid and neighborhood associations, and I suppose the city as well, to put up temporary signs for community events.
Yeah,
but in between, it would be blank.
Well, that kind of concerns me because those things tend to be covered with signs all the time if there's not regulations on them. I mean, we're talking about the same thing in Corona Del Mar on the signs that hang up in the median there. So I've got a little bit of concern about how we handle that part of it.
They incorporated a permanent holder so that any information there, as we're proposing for Corona Del Mar, would have to be of the same size. It would be whatever the dimension is. You would know going in that if you were going to do the chili cook-off or whatever it is on the point, that you would have to have a 3x4 or whatever it is. There'd be certain standards to be met so that every banner looked consistent and looked good, and so it didn't in any way diminish the sign.
Beyond which I assume we have some sort of regulatory control here about when signs are put up and how long they're put up, and so I'd certainly expect that would continue to be the case. If we need to beef that up a little bit, I'd be okay with that, but I think your comments are well taken, Nancy, on the design.
I think it's on. I'll support the more robust alternative. I agree that, the day we build a parking structure on there, maybe a long ways out, and there's no point in looking at something ugly for the next 10 or 15 years, so.
As Bill's coming up, remember, because Amy Senk is in the audience, that point of the sail can't poke above, because I think it does cause a little bit of a danger there. So, Mark Harmon's here when it's installed.
Thank you, W.R. Dilding. I appreciate all of your comments in reference to parking. I've been a property owner down there since 1965. I thought things would change and I would be over on the waterfront, but it seems like those properties escalated more than mine did. Since 1996, when the bid was formed, and I have been in the bid. Now, the bid starts, and where this sign will be located is in the middle of the village. The two sides of Balboa Boulevard, from Cypress, and that's where the phone company building is, on both sides, for 2 blocks down to Adams, are in the bid. I've been downzoned 3 times, and with the overlay of the SP8, specific Plan 8, with additional requirements that my neighbors don't have. I appreciate what the original project did. Yes, I got new sidewalk, I got new curb and gutter, and I got rid of the drive approaches, and I have better street lighting. I think from the studies that I have been exposed to since the early 90s, there's been more studies down there about every other year. It's kind of unbelievable that we need to do something. The comments about if somebody was going to come up with a $500 million to do the museum and the theater and all that, man, let's do it now. In reference to this sign, the fact that it's in the middle, I'm opposed to a public bulletin board there. From what I've seen take place in the past on some of the existing businesses, I think the sign should be smaller. It's in the middle of the district. They're going to know they're there. We have nothing. If you want to just work with AT&T and put a sign on the side of their building. That building was the ugliest thing until the bid was formed and the specific plan was formed, that we got I don't know who it was then, to come out and paint murals on there, and the building looks fantastic. The other concern I have in this area in trying to attract businesses is we need a place and some enforcement on bicycle parking. Now, not to name specific businesses, you can't walk up to the entrance without falling over a bicycle. The vehicle code says they are vehicles where bicycles are to be parked. On the back side of the corner, there's a couple of good-sized areas of landscaping that I think some bike racks could be installed in, and on occasionally, particularly during the summer months, cite these people. But I think that's the first step we've got to work on. My biggest nightmare, this whole development, is when the old Bank of America building was denied after having all the improvements in to be a restaurant. Had that still been there, I deep inside feel that we wouldn't have had the problems in the village that we've experienced the last 20, 25 years. But I think the big thing is a smaller sign, some bicycle parking, and I appreciate option 1. If you walk around that block now, particularly on Bay Avenue, with the undergrounding of the utilities in that assessment district, it looks like you could play an odd game of hopscotch where they've come back and replaced concrete with not lights and light colors. The other thing that I'd like to comment about is in the original Balboa specific plan, there was question about undergrounding the utilities. They said there was other projects for that. I'm happy to say with AD 101, the poles on the bay side of the blocks in the specific plan have been removed, and it looks like the rest of them are going to be out of here by Memorial Day. We'll talk with the utility people today. And thank you. The Public Works Department has done an outstanding job in what a difference. I think even those that raised Holy Cain, as you know well before, are saying thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the council. Staff, do you have adequate direction on this matter?
Unless there's any change from earlier comments, yes, I do.
I would just comment very briefly in response to Bill that we are working on a parking governance plan for Balboa Village, a component of which, and I know in the Walker parking study, was to provide for bicycle parking along the way as we get things rearranged down there. Is that right, Sharon?
Yes.
All right, Mr. City Manager, you have some comments for the make on City Hall?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and council members, again, with the council's permission, we're going to spend some time making a presentation to you that covers items 21, 22, and 23, which is on your regular session tonight. This, of course, will be available to the public as if they wanted to watch this on tape. And then if any aspect of it you wanted represented tonight, we're happy to do that. We've reached another milestone in the Civic Center project. Today is the completion of the design development phase. And think of any capital project as having 4 major phases, at least in its design. So this is the end of that. I'll let Public Works Director Steve Badham take over from here. And Steve, I'll move the computer for you if you'd like. Okay. We're going to need to get you a mic. Okay.
Okay. All right. Dave, we're going to send you to class. Dave just has an old version. See, we're so frugal, we have old versions of PowerPoint, so he doesn't know the new version, so I'll defend him there. Anyway, we wanted to run through this fairly quickly, as Dave said. We wanted to kind of show you what the latest was and what the changes have been between the schematic design and the design development and what's next. And of course, there's our lovely rendering. We stole all these from Bowen Zwinski Jackson. Here's, of course, the layout, as you're all familiar with. Not a lot has changed. So we've got the City Hall office building, the parking structure, the Civic Green in the middle, the library expansion. We'll start up at the park, northern parcel, what we call the dog park area, which is up here. And although the colors aren't showing, there's artificial turf. There's like 3 different kinds of surfaces in here we think will work out really well. There's what Sarah would say the Belvedere, which is essentially a viewpoint that looks out over the park below and off to the ocean. There are 20 parking spaces off of Avocado and a number of trails still in the plan. Now the Central Park, again, not a real lot has changed. Sarah had extended the trees along Avocado a little bit here. The walkways have changed a little bit. There is a general area here for we might have some whimsical kind of play area. There are locations throughout the park plan that show opportunities for public art, and we're working with the Art Commission, and the mayor has been heavily involved in that as well for that. And of course, we have the 3 bridges, the long one, the kind of the short platform bridge, and the other one at the end. You might notice we've taken the pedestrian overcrossing on San Miguel out of the kind of the bigger picture. We're going to probably keep that in, but as a alternative item. And of course, back to the City Hall area. And some looks here. These are they generated some views. This is the view from the Civic Green, and as you can see the roof, and you can see it's kind of starting to look more like a building. There, the little pieces and odds and ends are coming into play. This is a view of the first floor. You can see how it's open. You can see quite right through it. There's offices on both sides of each bay and the area in the middle. We haven't really figured out what the furniture is going to be like there, but we're still working on that. The kind of the same thing upstairs. the open area in the middle with the offices on either side. We also wanted to tell you that, we had formerly, part of the schematic plan, we had the EOC underneath an outdoor area here adjacent to the library extension. We've now moved that into the basement. And this is the area up here. This is where the loading dock area would be, and the kind of the receiving area. Mostly mechanical space over here, some storage, the restrooms. So this is really where we've kind of tucked in the training room and what we're calling disaster preparedness room. We're not quite sure what to call that yet, but it's essentially our EOC, but we don't say that out loud. Here's another look of it. It's a little easier to see. Again, this is the delivery area, the loading dock. This is the training room. There's a hallway here, an elevator that goes up, the restrooms over here, and all the mechanical spaces. Okay, kind of switching over to where the changes that have occurred over in the community room and the council chambers. As you're aware, we've went back to kind of the original size for the community room, but there still is a fairly good overhang here that could be used as an outdoor space. And it kind of ties nicely with, this is kind of a cross-section through the community room and the city council chambers, and you can see how it kind of ties together. There's a patio in between and a roof overhang, so that this is kind of a nice area here, and that's still continuing to be developed.
Steve, how high is the ceiling in the community room?
Ooh, good question.
How high is it compared to this ceiling?
Any of my driver friends remember? Pretty similar to this? If we saved shipping the architects down, they would have had those answers for you. This is the council chamber so far, although we're looking at maybe one big screen instead of two little screens. And we're talking about doing the dual podiums, keep meetings moving quickly. There's another view of it. And again, the design just keeps getting more refined, and we're getting better on the costs. Also, the library addition area. And this is kind of a little rendering of the outside. And you can see this is the addition area here, although it doesn't really look pretty in this. This is more of a stick drawing. This is buried below the ground, and the slope now just kind of runs down here. So this looks very much like a natural slope now instead of a retaining wall. And this is a kind of a cutaway of the downstairs area. This is the media rooms and some storage. And you can see the expansion of the children's room and the reading area. And then upstairs, more area with a restroom kind of module in the middle. And then as you come up the stairs, you're into this big open area that leads to the outdoor patio. This area would be the cafe area, and the other side would be the credit union. There's a cutaway section of it. Here's the existing library downstairs. You'd go up the stairs. Normally you'd take the stair back up this way to the second story, but now you're going to continue on, and you'll be able to walk around. And this will be the kind of the new entry, or the back entry, where the cafe and the credit union are. And of course the space is downstairs. This is a view of that from the from the Civic Green. There's an nice interior view. As you notice, you can see right on through to the existing library building, so this will be nice and open in here. And this is a kind of a view from the existing library looking out to the Civic Green. And this is the stairwell right here. And this is a look coming up the stairs. Another look back into the library. Security panels, although we're still working on that design. And this is the stairway down to the first floor. And so we want to kind of summarize the changes as with design refinement. Typically when we do the estimates and we look at the value or the construction costs, we put in allowances for various things until they get better designed. And now we're finding that the designs are getting more refined, so the allowances are getting replaced by actual design. And so the value engineering continues on that process, so we can kind of hopefully bring the costs down. We have, like I mentioned before, we did take the pedestrian bridge out and the photovoltaics out, and we're going to keep those in, but as alternate bid items, so that they can we can make that decision later on. The changes, we've made some considerable changes to the library expansion, as you just saw. All those spaces have been modified a bit. The separate EOC is now the disaster prepared room in the basement. The landscaping, we've had some more refinements, and the public art locations. And the parking structure, which is a considerable change from before, is now moving to a design assist build project, and that's a case where we're putting together bridging documents that essentially set the sizing and the aesthetics, but leaves the structural design to the contractor. And CW Driver's in process right now preparing that package, and I think it's going to be going out very soon, hopefully this week, and we'll be getting some bids back for that, and hopefully the trend continues of good costs. And then the community room back down to $150. Regarding estimates, I guess the theme here is estimates are estimates. We're trying to refine them. As time goes on, they get better. We put this together just to really kind of show you how we've been doing this. We have CPO Halloran, which is a firm that does cost estimating, and they kind of do it kind of like, I guess we want to say from the 30,000 foot up kind of approach, where they're looking at trends and they're looking at overall packages. And then we have Driver doing really a grassroots, get down in the weeds cost estimate, where they are really looking at every single item. In fact, we were saying today, nuts and bolts, right down to the nuts and bolts. And so they tend to be a little more conservative on their numbers. So you can see that on the schematic design, they went from 115 million down to 110 million, and CPL Howard went down from 113 to 102. We've tried to reconcile both these numbers, and we think there's some good reasons for others. Some have little pads and allowances in. CPO Howard's Drivers certainly has some conservative numbers in there for things that haven't been bid out yet. But we think the real truth is somewhere in the middle, and we've kind of picked the 105 number as our target, and that was the target, as you might remember, that we picked back in schematic design as our number. What's next? The mask excavation project is on the bid tonight. The approval of actually the construction manager at risk contract, which includes that mask excavation, and that will be starting up in the next month. And you can see the schedule. June, we're going to have the design assist build packages. We're going to also look at the major bid packages by November, starting the parking structure in December, and everything else in January, and hopefully be done by fall. Now, I wanted to give you a quick little run through on the CM at risk contract too. And I think this will give us a little better idea of how it really comes together. Just a quick reminder, alternative delivery method, that's what this is. It replaces, essentially this whole package, the CM at risk package, replaces the actual traditional construction. So you can imagine going up to design right to the point where you normally go out to bid on the traditional process, but then you switch to the CM at risk, and it covers everything in the construction. So we hired CW Driver on a quality-based selection process, and they work on a time and materials basis, more or less. We do separate bid packages. In fact, we're looking tonight at the dirt package and the shoring wall package, amongst some other little incidental items. And as you can see that over time we'll have probably have, I don't know, about 100 packages or something like that by the time we get done. The construction manager driver prepares a maximum, guaranteed maximum price based on the collective bids from each one of these packages and whatever incidental costs are involved. And then we bring that to you, and you either accept it, and then hopefully we get to construct it. Once that's in place, if we go over the GMP, the CW driver would be responsible for any costs above that GMP. If it's under, we share the savings with them. There are essentially 4 components of the contract with driver. Basic services are sometimes referred to as general conditions. That really represents all the field office personnel costs to manage the subcontractors. These are the folks that are right there on the site, on the job. We're generally there for the whole length of the job. It's on a time and materials basis. We have a cost breakdown in the contract that shows those costs. The second component is the actual GMP, and that's the actual cost of the work. And it's all the bids of the various trades plus incidental work. And in fact, later on, I'll say that we're going to phase this in a little bit, obviously, with the dirt one being first. Direct expenses, which are kind of your fixed numbers, more or less, the insurance, bonding, and then any other services that we might ask for. And then the construction management fee, which is really just the markups, overhead, and profit. And for this project, we're setting that at 3.25%. We're also looking at the phased GMP in order to expedite this project. So we're starting off with the mass excavation and shoring wall construction. The next one, as we said, will be in June, the design assist build parking structure project or phase, and then the rest of it. And here's the basic breakdown of the contract, the basic services, and that's the number, the 7.1 million. That's the number for the whole project till move-in, through move-in. The mass excavation is essentially phase 1 of the GMP, and that's 6.7 million, and that is a compilation of all of the bids for the various packages that were bid out recently, along with some incidental items, and there's a breakdown included in the contract documents. And I want to also point out that includes an 8% contingency, and a little bit about that contingency. The way we have this set up is that if driver is fortunate enough to preserve that contingency, the city will get that back, but in order, as an incentive, we're going to share 25% of that contingency if it's unused. In addition, with any savings at all, I mean, even if the project comes in under the under the cost, under the contingency, we would share that benefit as well. Then there's the direct expenses that we just mentioned, and then the construction management fee, which is a 3.25. We're also putting in a contingency, and that's for owner-directed items. Let's say the building committee sees a need to upgrade something that they didn't see in the plans initially. That is money there that we could use that for. Now, hopefully we don't have to do that. Additionally, there's money there in case we run into something, and this is the dirt part is probably the scariest part of this project, where we do have the potential to run into various archaeological artifacts or other things that might stop our construction and might slow us down and might cause us to have a few more expenses. Once we get done with the grading and we start getting into foundations, the likelihood of change orders starts going down, and so we'll be able to hopefully drop that size of that contingency considerably. A little bit more about the GMP. As I said, they absorb the overrun if they go over that GMP amount, and it does include that contingency that is for missing items of work that are not covered. These are items outside of things that we would say unforeseen problems like the soil conditions or any maybe problem with the plan. And then, again, we have that separate contingency for those types of things. And then any savings in the project, including the contingency, is shared with driver as an incentive, with 75% going back to the city and 25% going to driver.
Steve, just a quick question here. This savings arrangement, of course, would not apply to the city contingency.
That is correct. Yeah, the city contingency is just our
Right.
Our thing.
So, that's all 100% to the
Yeah.
city's benefit if that doesn't get sent. So
Right.
It only applies to the 8% in the actual construction.
That's correct. And this didn't come out too good. But I do have a copy of it in front of you. And what I tried to do is kind of show the timeline and the costs together. And so I broke it up into a couple here. And it starts off with the top of it is the design competition way back in 2008. Then the environmental phase. In fact, this slide kind of shows all the things that have happened already. The environmental documentation and just the start of some monitoring. We have in design, we had the kind of the concept refinement, the schematic design phase, and design development phase for the architect and his team. We also had a considerable amount of soils report kind of work ongoing the whole time here. And project management, this is CW Driver. This is their costs for the managing the pre-design stage and their costs for managing the schematic design and design development stage. And some totals here. And then this is the slide that's really interesting. Here's where we are right now. This is this meeting here where we're going to consider the approval of the at-risk contract and the first phase of the GMP. And you can see that along with that, we have the continued environmental monitoring. Part of that you're going to be hopefully approving tonight on tonight's agenda for LSA to come in and do biological and archaeological monitoring. We're going to continue with the design, the production of documents, what we call construction document phase, and that will be done in November, December, close to the end of the year. Since we are starting with some construction, there is some support money in here for the architect to start working on supporting all of the work that's going on out in the GMP Phase 1, which is the mass excavation, and continued management by driver over this design process. So this is the project management, and then we get down to construction, where we have, up here you see the basic services that start right now and run all the way to the end of the project. The first phase of the direct expenses, and then subsequent phases will be here. And this is just an estimate number. The construction management fee, which is the 3.25 for right now for this phase, and then this is a projection on what we think it might be for the rest of the job. And then, of course, the actual hard bids for the dirt and shoring. And then we can see shortly after we're looking at the parking structure, and we're just showing a plug number of about $8 million there. And then we start jumping into, at the end of the year, close to the end of the year, November, we've got the City Hall office building at 50, the library expansion at 8.2, and the park at 18. And we're hoping that, the total here is, we use the 105 number because that was the target number that we originally had set during the building committee and during the schematic process. And then what I did is I kind of totaled it all up to see where we are to date. If we use this number for construction and everything we've spent in design and project management along with the environmental, it comes to a pretty big number. These are the alternatives, the pedestrian crossing and the photovoltaics. So that number can be as high as $129 million. That's our conservative number, and we're basically calling that our current conservative projection. Now, we kind of tossed this around and said, okay, what could we reasonably expect? We looked at maybe perhaps a 10% reduction. Of course, a lot of this money's already been spent, but looking at the construction money, we think we can bring that down considerably, and you can see how it drops to 115 without the alternatives. And then our thought was, well, if Driver does a really, really good job, and we know they will, and they save that contingency, we can drop this further, and then as well as our contingency. And I didn't do a column for that, but so you can see we can get down here. We're hoping to around 110 all in with all the costs, and the actual construction stays closer to about $90 million. So that's kind of where we're setting, and I guess I just want to emphasize that, you know, we hate putting numbers out because people just glom hold of the number. Every time we go through this process, the number keeps going down. You can see how we came down from schematic design through the end design development. We expect that number to kind of get further refined, and we hope it drops down. We'll be constantly doing more value engineering, working with the building committee. So we're hopeful that we can bring this down even farther. That's pretty much everything I had. If there's any questions.
Mr. Mayor, if it's all right, I had a couple of follow-up comments to what Steve said, and then certainly welcome your questions. One is that I know in the Finance Committee, the goal of this project's funding is to get that 110 number at the end down to 105. And I'm happy we've gotten this close, but I know that in terms of financing, I wish we had gotten closer. And I think that's a discussion that I hope you're comfortable continuing to walk down the path on this project. As Mayor Pro Tem Henn has noted before, there's that point there in, Steve has it as a crosshatch number, when you will know the hard numbers on the bids. And that's really where the rubber meets the road for that end number, because we'll know what if we had problems with the dirt. And we're already seeing, yeah, it's the third one, as Steve's pointing out, we've seen the Mass X numbers come in significantly lower than the estimates. We are hopeful that, I continue to be the unflappable optimist, we're hopeful the parking structure will do the same thing. So the key will be that day in November, that second meeting in November, when the actual bids for the major portion of this come in. And then you always have the option, to that point, in phasing something. You could decide to not look at the library expansion at that point. That would be a sad thing, because I think it's great to do this all at once in one project. But I wanted to provide you that assurance that our goal is to continue to work with the building committee to reduce costs so that you can achieve the entirety of this project. So with that, we'd welcome your comments.
Here is a project that is going to cost more than anything we've ever built. And this is not going to be part of the presentation tonight?
We can make it part of your presentation tonight.
Maybe I'm alone, but I would think that, I know some of you are very, very intimate with this. You've been working on it very carefully. Staff has been working on it very closely. But a lot of our people are going to be coming tonight because they see it's on the agenda. And they're going to get, hey, approve the contract. Now, perhaps I'm alone in that, and I will defer, but it seems to me that what we have seen would be of great interest to the residents, and they might not think to turn on the study session since it's not listed. So that's one of my concerns. I never built anything. If we start digging, are we going to dig a hole that forces us to do things even if we want to phase it, because otherwise we'll just have a very big hole there? I don't know.
Well, we have to have a building pad. That's the only way you create the building pad to build City Hall. And we have to have a parking structure. I mean, those are two elementary components of this project that are there no matter what.
I understand that. I think that those two, but would we then have created a hole that we have to, if we decide we want to phase the library, say, well, you really can't because it's...
The library is physically feasible. I talked with CW Driver about this, and they encourage us to do that project now because it's going to cost more later. It's going to cost more to maneuver the cranes in and do that work while there's a parking structure and a civic green and a city hall. But it is possible to do that later.
Then is it common, or at least not extraordinary, to start projects when you do have floating numbers like this? Usually, as I said, when you build a house, they give you, it's going to cost you this, of course, it's going to cost you more, but they tell you what it's going to cost you.
Okay, can you tell me anyone that ever built a house for what the original cost estimate was? I'd like to meet that person.
You go in thinking you're going to spend this much money. We're giving within, $20 million or something. Is this normal to start a project like that? I don't know. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just asking if that's extraordinary or something that's normal in this sort of thing.
So it may be appropriate to have Robert or William comment on that if they'd like, 'cause they're used to building things like this. So Robert Schaefer and William Hahn from CW Driver.
Honorable Mayor and Councilman, I'm Robert Schaefer.
And
William Hahn. I'm head of the Estimating and Pre-Construction Department at CW Driver. It is actually in the private sector, it is very common for us to do this kind of a thing. We just completed the California Grand Hotel for Disneyland, and it was probably, I'm not supposed to say the number, but it was the same size or slightly bigger than this. And we approached it with the same kind of strategy. We did very complete, thorough budgeting, as we're doing now. We looked at everything. We built a lot of buildings, so even if it's not shown on the drawings, we put it as a line item and we cost it out. And we phased that project just like we're doing now. We put together a demolition package. We put together, there were parking lots and such there. We had a large excavation. There's a 2-level below grade parking structure underneath the building. We hauled away all that earth. We built shoring walls just like we're doing here, and we did that incrementally in phases. And we really call it fast tracking. And again, the private sector does that very frequently to take advantage of the market and to get their product completed a lot of times months or even years sooner. Yeah.
One, as far as our design, I know you're still thinking in terms of staff and structure and everything. Are we going to be flexible enough to be able to accommodate new visions of how the city functions?
I've driven the architects crazy with that belief, that it needs to be flexible enough to accommodate a different organization.
And then also on the finances, we have a policy that we won't spend more than 5% of our general fund on this. And will these numbers get us there?
The question will be at the end, when this November date, when we're packaging the bonds. We have the Finance Committee as well as Tracy have been working together on this facilities financing plan such that whatever we end up with, it will be below 5%. The other things come into play. What bond rating we get, what bond payment we get, rate. Things like what happens to the current City Hall site. If that's an income-producing stream back there, that helps the numbers too. So a lot of things that you'll decide on soon will affect that ultimate plan.
But to answer your question, our current estimation is predicated on $105 million. So to the extent that the total we finally end up with exceeds that, it'll be an issue with regard to the facilities financing plan. Now, I say it'll be an issue. It's not necessarily the case that it would blow something up, but right now we're playing it very close to the wire on that plan based upon $105 million.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. One is I think we're taking the right approach on this. First of all, we've got a buildings block approach here to dealing with it so that we'll be able to pick and choose what we want to do within reason. We're not going to know what the costs are until the bids come in. It's a changing bid environment out there. I think we have an idea where the bids are trending. And then last of all is the building committee is continuing to do value engineering on this. We have a number of items that are potentially big ticket items. Some of them involve sacrificing maybe some aesthetics for more utilitarian approach, and things that we're continuing to consider as we look at how these numbers develop. So it's an evolving process, and I think the gentleman from Drivers stated it correctly as far as how this process works, and we're really not doing it much different than private sector does on a major project like this, because you never really know on something this huge, you really never know up front exactly what the costs are, so it's an interactive process you go through as you go down the road.
I think that's an important message for this evening's session, too, that the you are continuing the value engineering in the committee as well as professionals.
Yes, in response to your first question, Nancy, I think we do need a presentation on this evening. It's hard to imagine not having that, as far as I'm concerned. And I think, a lot of the comments that are being made right now, some of them should be repeated this evening about it. Now, having said that, I do have a lot of confidence in the building committee, who's on that committee, and the diligence that they're going through this process with. To me, that's probably the most important positive here. Having said that, when we look at these numbers, what we're really trying to do here is produce a best case result, because we are continuing to convince ourselves we can get to a best case answer. I'm okay on the one caveat that CW Driver doesn't come up there in November and say, well, we told you can phase the library expansion, but really, that's probably not feasible. Or it'll cost you an extra $20 million to build it some later date, set up a set of alternatives that make it impossible for a rational person to conclude that we should phase that. That would break the faith with me. I'd like to hear you comment about that. Now.
CW Driver has been in business since 1919, and the majority of our work is repeat business, satisfying clients. And I was going to say we want to be in business by 2019, but I can't retire then, so I'm going to say we want to be in business by 2039 for sure. So you have our insurance that we are not the kind of contractor that pulls that. We believe in repeat business on doing the right thing. As with any project, if you make substantive changes, there are things that have to be considered. But no, we're not going to play that game.
Well, I was sort of tempted to think maybe we should have hired C.P. O'Halloran for the estimates from that prior slide.
We could, although the difference is he around? No.
Yeah. Be a rosy picture.
I was just kidding, by the way.
Okay. But again, as Steve mentioned, theoretical estimators such as O'Halloran are very helpful in the marketplace, but their methodology is a 30,000-foot look. And our common practice, again, talking about the Disney Hotel, we came in probably 6 or 7% below the original budget that we put at this time. We've done a number of other projects in this delivery method where we've beat the number, and it's our philosophy and our practice to give you reasonable pricing as we go through, and we don't like surprises other than good ones. So,
Robert is the person that every time I try to wheedle down the estimate, Robert will say, no, the conservative one is this. And at the same time, they have been really aggressive with the building committee and with the landscape architect and the architect about saying, do you really need that type of water fountain or bench? And it's a really interesting and effective dynamic, and I'm thankful that they're here because that's why the cost is going down.
I found it interesting, not to divulge secrets here, but the driver was chiding I think it was either the architects or the landscape architects for specifying, I don't know, a bench from Australia and something from some other exotic place in the world. Nothing. Yeah, so you guys are on top of it.
And just for the record, the architects have been very willing to listen to those concerns because I also know they're home watching this, or they will. So they've been as willing as you would expect them to be to make these changes.
I would just note, I think the important takeaway from this is that the numbers are going down. We are getting this down to be narrow and more defined, and that's certainly going in the right direction. There's a little bit more to go, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to move in that direction appropriately. If there's no other council comments, let me open.
Can I just make one comment on the presentation tonight? I guess I'd go along with doing the presentation, but I think maybe, Steve, you guys could look at compacting it down a little bit, seeing how you can get the same gist out there, but maybe not taking this much time because we're going to have a long meeting tonight.
I think maybe if the council, check me if I'm wrong here, maybe go at the first part of Steve's presentation, that is the diagrams and the changes. We would spend less time on the CM at risk unless there were questions that came up. Okay. Okay.
Let me open this up for public comment on this matter.
WR building, I don't know if I really want to be up here or not. I have represented specialty contractors for 26 years on a state commission dealing with public works. I had question when I saw advertised in the newspaper for bids, for requests for proposals on design build on the parking structure. Is there any action going to be taken tonight on the parking structure?
Well, there is a management aspect to CW driver's contract associated with that, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, that's my understanding. Part of your contract that we're approving tonight involves the design assist build component. It's not the project, but it's preparing for the project to be released for bid.
Now, are they going, I'm just going to ask this publicly, are they going to be responsible? First of all, when the other project was to take place at the existing site, I'm the one that questioned the city's legal authority to use design build. It came back at the next council meeting, they never got back to me as an individual, that it would be design bid build. And I believe it was 208 or 207 that all cities can use design build. The first question, my interpretation, is that the city council should have taken a position to allow design build on the parking structure. Now, maybe that's part of this presentation tonight.
I believe, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I believe the council gave us that direction at a previous meeting. We brought this item, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, it wouldn't have been, may have been in November shortly thereafter with schematic design. That's when we brought it to them, asking for specific direction to move forward with a design build on the parking structure.
Okay, that's a dead issue. I'd ask the city clerk. There's no recollection. I didn't go back. The other thing is, who's going to be responsible for the required labor compliance program that is in the act, in the law? Also, at the completion of this project, there has to be a report to the state legislature. Now, I have a good friend who was public works director, I believe it was Vacaville, who, there were two cities when design build came about in the state of California that were given permission. And the story that I have heard from both of them over the years, your League of California representatives on our commission, has been that it wasn't worth it to us because of all the requirements that we had to meet. So my only concern is, has the city looked at all the details in design build for a municipality? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Karen Tringali from Corona Del Mar. I just wanted to come back and make sure we understand what we're talking about as far as the disaster planning room. Last April and last November, we talked about dedicated EOC being moved into the basement area of the main structure. I think at that time we were still calling it EOC, and one of the concerns that we as residents had without an EOC we run the risk of not being able to have a proper place for city leadership and continuity of government in the event of disaster. Also, it would put us at a disadvantage when it came time for seeking FEMA funding to offset some of the costs of the EOC. So I just, in looking at the presentation that was up there this afternoon, I'm just not clear if we're moving from an EOC to a disaster planning room, and we have plenty of issues on the cost of construction. Are we basically shutting then the door for FEMA funding on this project?
Mr. Mayor and council members, good questions, Karen. There are two ways of looking at the EOC and disaster preparedness room. One is through the eyes of the building code, which says if you're calling something an EOC, the entirety of the building in which it's housed needs to be built to EOC standards. We did not want to do that, obviously, as large as the city office building is. The second lens is to look through FEMA's eyes and say, is this indeed a room that qualifies for grant funding as an EOC? And my conversations with Katie and the fire chief have answered that in the affirmative. It does qualify. So right now we do expect it to be fully set up. We will be seeking some grant assistance in the range of up to $1 million. That next bid process opens February 15th of 2011. So this room, I've been told, is eligible for that. We're not quite done with the design and making it work in Katie's eyes, but we're continuing to talk with her about that.
And so if the approval is tonight, whatever ongoing discussions, it can still continue?
It certainly will continue with the building committee and or the city council, but tonight's approval would be the format in which it's shown today, which again qualifies for FEMA funding and allows us to continue to do that.
Thank you. Any other public comments? All right, seeing that, we're going to Mr. Pim.
Yeah, just one other question. We did have a presentation at the Finance Committee about owner-controlled insurance programs. Have we dispensed with that issue, or is that still an issue that's under discussion? Where does that stand?
I knew Lauren Farley was here for a good reason. So Lauren Farley is our risk manager.
Yes, that feasibility study is almost complete. Ron Rakish from Rakish and Associates is here to answer any specific questions, but that draft is, that study is in draft right now, and it's headed toward final, I think, by the end of the week.
Because I did notice some amounts here having to do with insurance, and I just, so that's still to be
considered. That is correct, and we put language in the CW driver contract at risk contract to make sure we still had the option before council to go ahead with the owner-controlled insurance program.
If I could just add to that, submitted to you this evening was a late communication from our office as well as the Office of Public Works on this very issue to make sure that that is still an option. So tonight, what the City Attorney's Office and with Public Works is requesting is that you do review that and consider the recommended action, which we have proposed, which is some red line changes on the insurance provisions.
Okay, are there any public comments on items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned until